with regard to the format of the meeting tonight, I'm really trying to replicate the same agenda that I'm having with students. So there's kind of four tasks that we're looking at between now and the start of next year's school year. Trying to give both concrete things to do, acknowledge that this is sometimes an overwhelming task, this kind of 12-month cycle of beginning and then finally accepting a college application, and that it takes a lot of pacing. It's kind of like running a marathon, and there are things that you can be doing right now, but you don't need to be doing everything. So kind of want to just let everybody know what to be focusing on right now. And again, our goal is between now and the end of the school year, I will probably be conducting 40 to 50 of the one-on-one individual junior conversations, and then other folks in the student services department will also be reaching out to students to schedule those conversations. If and when we're able to have those conversations before school, after school, or during school with Zoom with parents, happy to. If it turns out that it's just us and students, that's all right as well. We're taking notes and can share those things out. Want to recognize that we're using all of the information from last year's presentation just to make sure that we're trying to give you as much information as possible. Generally speaking, if I'm having this meeting one-on-one with the student, I give them some information, but kind of let their answers to the questions drive the conversation. Given that I'm running through this with 20 or so of you right now, I'll kind of just give the generic framework and then fill in as much information as I can. Know that I can take some Q&A at the end, and also that many of you are still be planning to meet with you in the coming weeks. An acknowledgement, like Nick said, that our COVID era is over, and most things that we're moving back to meeting in person, but we find out things like this, a webinar where we can both have a live audience, take some Q&A in real time, but also capture this and let you all come back to this information, and others access it at a different time and place works out best. So again, if you want to schedule a follow-up conversation with me, both to talk about your student or any of the things that we cover here tonight, happy to do that. On that note, Nick, I'll just ask for you to go forward with slides. Am I able to do that, or is that your power? Okay, so I will just say, I am often finding myself leading the meeting just saying like, hey, there's essentially 4 things for you to be doing between now and when we start school up again after Labor Day. I'll say what all 4 of them are and kind of walk through them over the course of this meeting. But again, speaking to an audience who is probably planning to put through college applications, we're saying building that applications list is probably both, on one hand, the funnest task and maybe the most overwhelming task to get all of that information, kind of run it through all your filters of what you're looking for and what you need, and come up with a manageable list. The second task is going to tour colleges, both potentially on road trips, maybe fly-out programs, fly-in programs, but certainly checking out the almost dozen schools that we have around the Twin Cities. Pretty concrete task is reaching out to Great River individuals with priority, and then maybe some of your other work, extracurricular, other things that you have going on in your life, adults, mentors, for letters of recommendation. And then the final thing is just knowing what the common application is. For those families that have maybe had an older sibling go through this process, you might be totally familiar. For others of you, this is maybe a 15-year-old tool that's really fantastic, and knowing how it works and when it works is an important thing. So those are really the 4 tasks that I'm going to be going over tonight, and that I go over with students in those meetings. So again, trying to give a lot of information on these slides. So I'll just acknowledge that, I'm a business major from the 90s. And so I actually have a lot of classes on PowerPoint slides, and will say like I'm breaking cardinal rules of having too much information and not enough graphics on a slide. But again, wanting this to be kind of a reference point for you. So again, just suggesting with regard to going on a college tour, I mean, the college experience is incredibly complicated. It's not just like pursuing your education, the classes, the majors, the degrees. It's where you're living. It's your community. It's the way that they're teaching. Some are very traditional. Some are not traditional at all. Some students are pursuing like conservatories for music or art. And so going and touring what those places look like. And we have almost all of those types of schools in the Twin Cities metro, right? So with regard to like smaller private liberal arts colleges, McAllister, Hamlin, St. Thomas, St. Kate's, one of the biggest schools in the country with the University of Minnesota, lots and lots of community and technical schools. Many students are already familiar with St. Paul College, Metro State, MCTC, Century College, because some of them are doing PSEO there already. Relationship with MCAD, some students are doing PSEO there and pursuing arts and design there, and then Dunwoody as a trade school. So these are kind of affiliations that we already have. Touring those places is a great place to start, and again, see schools that are a couple hundred students all the way up to 80,000 students. Researching a list of colleges. Again, thinking about yourself as a student, what motivates you to learn, what you're excited about. Certainly talking about financial need, balancing things like what's in-state tuition, reciprocity, out-of-state tuition, public, private. All of these variables are going to be also what inform the mix of colleges that you're putting on your overall list of schools to apply to. Acceptance rates is something I think I'll speak to again, but knowing that some schools, including McAllister, may have thousands of students applying, but will accept less than 10% of their students, whereas public schools, part of that taxpayer money that's going to fund them is the intention of educating those students in that state or surrounding states, and so they intentionally have a larger acceptance rate than most private schools. And then with regard to asking for a letter of recommendation, the general practice is 2 teachers, preferably core teachers, unless you know exactly what you want to study. Balancing the humanities with the math and sciences, STEM, is ideal. Having them more recent than not, so if you know who your senior teachers are going to be, that can be strategic. Certainly asking your junior teachers. If you're going to ask a junior or senior teacher, then maybe you're going to go back and ask a 9th or a 10th grade teacher. Adding a 3rd letter of recommendation can be possible and advisable, especially if you're doing something like robotics or your CAS internship or a job that you might have that's connected to a field you might be interested in pursuing. But for now, talking about asking for letters of recommendation from your core teachers that you have ideally this year is on that to-do list. So Nick, I'll have you go forward one. Okay, probably the most information on this slide here, but I will say using the Common Application makes it far more efficient to apply to more colleges. I guess maybe I'll speak a little bit about Common Application right now. Maybe a 15-year-old tool. It is a website. You would go on and create an account. It goes live every year in early August. And so again, whether it's myself or somebody in this role, reach out to the whole class and say, all right, Common Application for class of 2025 is live. You can go in, sign up, create an account. We've got word that the personal essay questions, maybe there's 10 of them to choose from. The list of personal essay prompts from this current year is the plan for next year, so you can probably see those already. But going in and creating an account in early August is something that you should plan to do, but probably only to the extent with playing around with it. Some of the College Finder tools and having an account is about all you need coming into the school year. But all to say, you will use the Common Application to upload all your demographic information, kind of all of your activities lists, all of your awards, honors, kind of your academic and extracurricular resume. Your transcript certainly goes there. Your letters of recommendation from college counselors, from teachers, from other mentors go there. Your personal essay goes there. And for 90 and 95% of your schools, you're going to be able to say, send this to the U of M and to McAllister and to all these other schools I want, sometimes paying the fee there, sometimes otherwise. But this is probably a platform to capture all of your applications. We tend to say, even though this is a really efficient tool, applying for more than 10 schools still can be a hard juggling act. A lot of times each school might ask for one additional personal essay or some kind of essay on some topic that other schools aren't asking for. And even if they aren't, it can be, less than strategic to go, I'm just going to pick a number, above 20 schools, because again, ideally you're picking schools that you are more than not likely to be accepted into, and then actually taking those acceptances and balancing out the probably more complicated financial aid packages and touring those schools and comparing. What is often true is that a lot of schools are really similar. If you have 20 schools that you're accepted into with all similarities, it can be really hard to choose. So again, some of the recommendations not to go far beyond 10. The mix that you're going to be looking at, this is again your homework of kind of, this is your time to dream and think about what you want your life to look like for the next, on average 4 years. Recognizing that many of the students, as they're talking about their plans, it includes whether it's med school, law school, or master's programs, licensing, certification programs, that your undergraduate degree might not be the only education you're talking about, both in terms of planning where you're going and planning your finances. But certainly having a dream school, it should be on your list. A safety school, and a safety school can be maybe a combination of 2 or 3 things. It might be a school with some of the highest acceptance rates. It might be a school that you already have an affiliation with because parents or family are alumni there or might work there, things like that. It might be a school that you already have a connection to. So it should be a school that you kind of don't need to guess whether or not you'll get accepted. We certainly can probably suggest that almost every single senior is going to change their major between now and when they graduate from college, and yet knowing what field they might want to be pursuing can still be important here. One of the reasons I say that is to say, if you're planning to study psychology, probably almost every college in the country has a psychology program. If you're planning to study engineering, it might be more like 5-10 schools in the entire Midwest that have an engineering program as an undergraduate. That's a bit more extreme. Obviously, if you're looking to do conservatories, that's a totally different program. Things like nursing might take half of your schools off the list. So certainly looking at potential majors is important, but probably not the driving factor. Already spoke a bit to acceptance rates. No reason not to have even a half dozen schools on there that are pretty selective with regard to acceptance rates, but having 2 or 3 on there that are above 50%, getting into the 60 to 70, often public schools, is strategic. Again, recognizing where we have relationships in terms of reciprocity up into Manitoba and Canada, over into Wisconsin, other surrounding states, some we do, some we don't. Getting more complicated into financial aid and scholarships is understanding need and merit-based aid and which schools offer which, and again, strategically balancing that in your application and your list of schools. Considering affiliations, again, if you have a caregiver who is a teacher at a school, you might have a consortium of schools that you have free tuition or reduced tuition costs. There might be other affiliations that you have and that your family might have that make it more strategic to pursue some schools versus others. Extracurricular activities, again, maybe often get the back burner, but when you're in several schools with a lot of very comparable programs and financial aid packages, this actually might be the deciding factor. A recognition that college is a lot of fun, and a lot of times this can be things like sports, theater, music, and other things. Me personally, I made lots of mistakes in my whole application and college selection process. I certainly was able to share a lot of those mistakes as then I worked with students to say, don't do what I did. But at the same time, I ended up going to the University of Minnesota and I skied on their varsity ski team, downhill ski racing. And it was, one of the highlights of my life. And so I certainly wouldn't trade it. I might trade some of my other majors that I don't use so often. But that extracurricular activity was probably one of the highlights for me. So again, knowing what schools have available to you, it can be important as well. Considering the learning environment, this is another reason that it can be really strategic to go around the Twin Cities and just talk to schools, especially ones that you're maybe not even considering going to, because then maybe you can ask the hard question, or depending on who you are as a student, what might be more challenging for you to ask about, like, for instance, how to get support. And so you might just talk about what tutoring services and other services, mental health support services look like on a campus, and see what schools around the Twin Cities respond. And then if you go to different schools or different parts of the country, see how those answers vary. I will tell you that I've often talked about Augsburg colleges in Minneapolis here as having some of the best student support. And so a lot of times students with interventions, 504 plans, special education IEPs, I'll suggest that they go tour Augsburg, even if they have no interest in going to Augsburg, because a lot of their student supports are some of the best that we've heard about around. And so comparing what they say with other schools can help you understand what support you might get in school. Yeah, you should be pretty strategic that every school on your list is there for a reason, and it kind of does a job for you. You might be looking at, one variable at this school, another variable at another school. But that's what you should be considering as you build that mix. There's lots of filters, including on the Common Application, where you can say, I'm looking for these types of schools, whether it's nursing or in the Midwest or this size range or this selectivity rates, and it will kick you back some information. So you can use some of those tools to develop this list. Also true that talking to this year's seniors, looking up at the College Board, currently up in the UA hallway has both this senior's current acceptance as of May 1st and all of last year's seniors. I've also got records for, pretty much all the senior classes for the last 10 years where students have gone to school. Can certainly tell you that, between the University of Minnesota Twin Cities and St. Olaf, we probably have at least 5 students going to those schools every single year, but there's other schools all over the country that we have 1 or 2 students going to every year. So talking to me, talking to others here, and talking to your senior class is another way to just get good advice about which colleges have been fun to work with so far and or have been, the most flexible in responding to financial aid. A couple other things to take into consideration. These costs can rack up. It might be a $100 fee waiver per school, but if you're applying for 20 schools, looking out to see if you might, your family might qualify for a fee waiver can be important. Again, talking about 100% need-based schools with or without loans. Lindsay Weaver can certainly tell you about the schools that reach out to her as IB coordinator saying like, hey, we probably give the best packages for students that have completed IB tests or the full IB diploma. I think as the IB diploma gets more and more popular at schools, high schools around the country, more and more schools, universities and colleges are speaking to that and not just PSEO and AP classes and saying, here's exactly what you can expect to get for all of these things, including like if you get a 4 on your IB math versus if you get a 5 on your IB math test. Again, recognizing I'm talking to lots of different families tonight. Some of our families are doing PSEO at schools around the Twin Cities. And so to the extent that you're interested in trying to use those PSEO credits to apply to your college experience, that can be part of the strategic how you're developing a college list is if you have a couple of credits or even more than that, maybe a year worth of college credit, making sure that they're honored if that's a priority of yours in the school that you're looking at. Just acknowledging that schools almost all have virtual tours. Beginning in May here, I think many colleges, May and June is a perfect season where a lot of campuses still have their full staff and in most cases, most of their student body. So this can be an ideal time to actually see what the colleges looks like, feels like while it's still vibrant and not on summer break. So taking some tours in the next couple of weeks can be a good idea. And then we have 60 plus schools that come and visit us between September and October in the fall as well. So lots and lots of college visits. Nick, I'll have you advance a slide. I think I'm talking about a lot of information that's on upcoming slides. Here's a timeline of the next probably 12 months. So again, I started probably a week's worth of one-on-one meetings with juniors back in March, right before spring break. Those one-on-ones will continue up until really the end of the school year. Really trying to make sure that I have one with every single junior. So if you're looking for one, we've got an indie work period or a Wednesday you want to meet with me, reach out to me. Probably a lot of you have emailed me and know that I've got an autoresponder on that has a Calendly link that lets you automatically sign up for times for me. I really like using that. So please absolutely take any slot that I've got available. I check it every morning and make sure that I know who I've got meetings with. And unless there's a crisis, I usually make all those meetings. So happy to meet with you whenever I can. Again, April, May, June here, looking at summer possibilities. What are you planning to do for work? Maybe if you've got a CAS internship, that's something you could continue into the summer. Talking with a couple of students in the last couple of weeks, feeling a lot of pressure to kind of land the perfect internship the summer after their junior year to go on their college application. Sometimes that happens. Usually it doesn't. What you're more than anything, interested in trying to do with college is to demonstrate kind of who you are as a learner, who you are with regard to curiosity, motivation, passion, drive, those kinds of things. And so this could easily be something that you just kind of like set up a shadowing interview, or you're shadowing in the workplace, in the lab, whatever it might be, asking to volunteer there. Often that can turn into a great letter of recommendation, and even just spending several hours is going to give you fodder for some of your personal essays and other ways that you write about what it is that you want to be doing. So even if you kind of don't land the dream internship, there's lots of things that you can be doing in networking. Um, I think one of the best places to start is, I think with our CAS program, we've got 30 to 40 local connections intentionally in all of these areas. And so reaching out to those folks, Lindsay Weaver is a coordinator there as well. So saying, who do we have relationships with around town, is a great way to just spend some of your extra time this summer. We had about 25 students take the ACT. I think it was 2 weeks ago that we ran it. Very true that ACT and SAT expectations drastically changed with COVID. We had the ACT scheduled for April of 2020 and canceled it. We've been running it for our entire junior class every year for several years up until then. Totally flipped in the last 4 years. Many schools said, don't worry about it, don't take it. Schools also said, I won't look at it, don't take it, don't send it to us, we won't take it into consideration. That's starting to change. One of the reasons that we offered it this spring is Minnesota Department of Education said it's now an expectation that schools offer it, if not require everybody take it. I think they're doing that partially as a step, recognizing more schools are asking for it. So again, looking at these school lists that you're putting together and seeing what they say about the ACT can be important, and you can strategically decide between now and, the earliest deadlines for schools is November 1st, but many schools is December 1st, January 1st. So thinking about taking an ACT, but I guess I would advise you to make that list first. It can be, in terms of financial cost, there's a cost to taking the ACT. The preparation cost of studying for it and doing it well, and stress on top of everything else you're doing, is probably a higher cost. So I would really reach out and see what colleges are saying, because it is shifting back, but it's certainly not back to required or expected for all students for all colleges. Spoke about letters of recommendation. The reason that I'm saying do this now is so that teachers have a good idea of who's going to ask them. Teachers are usually wanting to write a good letter of recommendation for their students, but again, knowing they can't write one for everyone. So they would like to know sooner than later who's all planning to ask them, so they can say yes to as many people as possible, and also just space it out so that if they choose to use their summer break writing a letter of recommendation, that's their choice. Far preferable than asking them over MEA break and saying, I need this in a week, would you consider it? They probably still want to, but aren't feeling as gracious about it, and frankly, probably will have to stress write your letter more than they'd like to. Mention that early August, the common application opens. We'll notify you. Checking it out, creating an account is your task there. Then moving into senior years, I'll read all of these out loud, but essentially say, the point of these conversations with juniors now and this presentation is, what do you need to do between now and then? Most of the work still is going to be in your senior year. So in September and October, the FAFSA opens. That is based on this year's tax filing, so last year's taxable incomes. So as you're submitting taxes a couple of weeks ago, just keep all those files, preferably electronically, handy so that we can use those beginning in the fall all the way through. Honestly, I was working with students with FAFSAs that are seniors a couple weeks ago. We usually run full senior application workshops on 2 major themes in September. One of them is how to strategically lay out, outline, and write your personal essays. The other one is about how to list activities and kind of making sure that you're not just listing your activities, but you're listing why you're doing your activities, what they've meant to you, leadership positions, and other things like that in your activities. College visits, like I said, we have about 60 schools from around the country and internationally that come and visit us because of relationships that we've built over the years. Handful of students will apply to QuestBridge. We will usually kind of have candidates in mind and we'll be reaching out to those students, but just an acknowledgement to everybody, that's the September 30th deadline. And so putting together this application is very much a September, October task. It's one of the reasons that we've really backed up a lot of our IB diploma candidate work, especially TOK and the extended essay into spring of junior year. So a lot of that work is done before. We probably spent about 10 years with IB diploma program where all of that work was coming due at the same time that college applications were coming due. So again, to those juniors that are playing with extended essays right now, get those things done so you can give yourself a summer break and prioritize this work in the fall and not have to do any other IB diploma candidate work. Early decision, I'll get into this a little bit, but early decision is a binding application and the commitment to that school, which then means that they will turn around and give you an answer about acceptance and financial determination as soon as possible. Those deadlines are November 1st. Early action is similar where they commit to giving you a fast answer, but it's not legally binding in the same way. And so there are often a variety of like November 15th, December 1st, December 15th early decision deadlines that are staggered. Some school will have actually more than one of those. December 1st can be a priority deadline for some scholarships. Priority deadlines for big public universities, certainly the University of Minnesota is the biggest one on December 15th. And then historically still probably the single biggest date of the school year is December 30th, 31st, January 1st, that end of year date timeline to get applications in. Should be obvious now, but not always obvious when we lead up to it that Great River is closed and people are not available and accessible. So certainly planning in advance so that you don't need anything from us and ideally from yourselves that you've got those applications in. The reality is with all of these deadlines between November 1st and January 1st, planning to hit one of these deadlines intentionally means that you've got almost all of your work done and it gets easier and easier to kind of add a thing and hit submit to more schools on the common application. Once you hit that January 1st deadline, your application season is predominantly done. It's true that there's rolling admissions at not a lot of schools, but some schools that carry on throughout the spring and students can still be applying to schools up until now in their senior year. But for most students, this is the biggest transition to say like the application season is done. Now I'm working on financial aid, scholarships, the FAFSA. And then there's a bit of a lull and we get in, certainly trying to have a good set of first semester grades. We get in those grades within about 2 weeks, mid-February. Those are all reported to colleges. And then students start getting kind of the bulk of their decisions. Again, early decision, early action. Students are getting some information back from schools as early as November, but March and April is really the season that you are then starting to weigh all the financial awards that have come through, potentially flying out to visit schools that you haven't seen before, maybe negotiating with schools, and then ultimately May 1st is your kind of commitment day to choosing a school. This year is a bit of an anomaly. The FAFSA was updated this year and was not always working correctly. So quite a few schools have actually extended the deadline for commitments to either May 15th or June 1st this year, but expectation that we're trying to get it back to May 1st across the country for next year. That's the timeline. Again, I know I see questions popping up, so I'm going to keep working through this. We're probably about halfway through and then answer as many questions as I can. Want to kick me forward, Nick? Thanks. Just some tips on visiting colleges. Spoke to this a bit already, but don't plan to spend hundreds of dollars if you don't want to or don't need to flying around the country. Lots of families will kind of strategically or in partnerships go on a road trip and intentionally try and pick off a couple of different schools on their list or different types of schools. But for many students, touring around the Twin Cities can accomplish a lot of the fact-finding that you need to do to know about schools. There are fly-in programs in the fall, and then as I mentioned, some of the schools that have given you an acceptance already will fly you out in the spring. So that's another reason you can be talking to those schools about any of those programs, and again, decide where you want to spend any of your travel time. But again, many of our families are traveling in the summer of junior year intentionally to look at schools. It's also one of the biggest trends during MEA break is to see if they can see a couple more schools. Um, Again, figuring out probably an electronic way to do a lot of comparisons. We've got a template we will share with students in the fall, both about like how to rank students with regard to priorities and different aspects of the school that they're interested in, and then a separate Google sheet that has kind of all of the financial aid packages so that you can compare schools. And so those are probably our preferred places and ways of taking notes on different schools. To the extent you can get there in May or in the fall to see what colleges or an active classroom, an active lab, any of these things, how they look with students in them is preferable. But schools are absolutely still doing tours all summer long. The thing I learned years ago when I was a college counselor too is like, this is really a relationship. They do want to know about you. They want you to be honest. They want to give you honest feedback about how to put together the best application possible, and honestly, if you'll be a good fit there. So I think it's a natural inclination for lots of folks to kind of like hold their cards close to their chest, only reveal information, not ask all the questions. And I think college admissions counselors said, please, like, let it all out there. We want to have this be a dance. We want to really like make you feel good about this, and also like give you really good advice. And the more we know about you and what you're looking for, the better advice we can give to you. Spoke about college visits and flyouts, fly-ins. Again, if you aren't spending time on college campuses, a lot of it's guesswork. So anything you can do to get out there. We've already done lots of field trips, starting with our Key Experience junior year, and still lots of times throughout this spring, students in different classes are going on college campuses, both to speak to the needs of their class, but intentionally to also get college students on college campuses. Kick me forward again, Nick. Okay, I'll again speak to all of this here. We're trying to give you a lot of information. I probably said a lot of this already. The application itself, which 95% will be on the common application, is student demographic info. Probably one personal essay. It's possible there might be two, or one that's specific to one school that you're applying to, listing your activities and your roles, leadership, captainship, things like that. Letters of recommendation. When it says supplemental essay, that's what I'm talking about, where when I say NA, it's not always. So some schools might ask you for additional essays, most won't. Lots of schools will interview you, and I think Zoom increased the prevalence of this. And with COVID and so many students kind of having P's on their transcripts, by virtue of like that was many schools' experience across the country of how students were earning grades, more schools found value in having interviews with students. Some of those are scheduled, and like I said, in person or on Zoom. Lots of those are also scheduled and intentionally done when the colleges visit Great River. A lot of times, if you have a connection with, an admissions counselor at a school, you can intentionally try to connect with them during your visits. And again, when I say demonstrated interest, I think we're taking notes, students are taking notes on colleges when they visit us, but the admissions counselors are also taking notes on you and take that information back. So the more that you are actually engaging with them and asking follow-up questions, they kind of remember it and take notes on it as well. So no reason not to pop into any college visit you want, kind of sit in the back and take in info. But if it's a school you're interested in, I would say practice some self-advocacy and get up there and ask questions. With regard to the financial forms that we use, we really recommend that everybody fill out the FAFSA, even if you don't anticipate getting aid from it. The CSS profile is something that probably 10 to 20% of families ultimately need to complete. It's based on a lot of the same type of information, but it's often 100% need-based schools that are asking for the CSS profile. You will know in consultation with the schools that you're applying to if they're asking for that. Sometimes as you're doing the financial forms, we'll work with you as a school to make sure you've got the kind of right custodial waivers, and then also work with undocumented students and or families following the Minnesota DREAM Act. With regard to forms and information that we're sending out, almost all of it goes through the Common Application, and the college counselor does this throughout the year. So that includes uploading transcripts with your initial application. Usually first quarter grades, obviously we work on semesters here at Great River School, but we'll take a snapshot or literally a screen capture of Power School at a grade reporting time, often around conferences, and send that as first quarter grades. The mid-year report is more formal. We'll send that out mid-February with your first semester finalized grades. I already spoke to your letter of recommendation writers. Not only will submit and upload that letter of recommendation, but they'll kind of go through like a 10-question kind of ranking scale. So that's the evaluation that's done by your letter writers and college counselor. Spoke a lot about letters of recommendation already. And I guess I'll add here that there's a Google form that I send out to students, and I have an email as well. Almost all teachers will take some of the things that you want them to write about you. So the letter of recommendation form just captures some of the things that you think about yourself as a student, as a learner, as a worker, as somebody demonstrating executive functioning abilities. So you fill out that form, and we push it along to teachers to say anything the student writes about themselves, feel free to include that in those letters of recommendation. It's your way to plug yourself. And then a final report is sent mid-June every year to everywhere in Common Application, but the school that you've committed to then pulls the final transcript from Common Application. So those are the reports that Great River sends out. You'd kick it forward, Nick. I think I already spoke to all of this, but kind of quickly going through, early decision is a legally binding agreement between you and your first choice in college. Parents or guardians must sign off on it, and it only is unbindable if not enough financial aid is given. This is almost always the November 1st deadline. Early action is non-binding, often November 15th, December 1st, December 15th. Recommendation that if you think you're going to have a really strong first semester of your senior year, you're taking either entirely IB classes or predominantly IB classes. Remember, those are GPA weighted, so your GPA is likely to go up. So a lot of times, waiting until you've got finalized grades can be strategic. And then regular decision, it's the bulk of application deadlines. It seems to be my experience that maybe half of the schools on your list, if you've got 10, probably 5 of them are one early decision, handful of early action, and then maybe 5 are regular decision. Go ahead, Nick. For caregivers, acknowledge this is a huge change for students. It can be really exciting. It can be really terrifying. It can be lots of things. Any given day, it can be a roller coaster through the 12-month process. College has changed a lot, I would say, in the last 20 years. So I think for most adults and parents, it's very different than it was in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. A lot of this process has remained the same in the last 10 years that I've been doing it. An easy example of that is like how important ACT, SAT was up until even 5 years ago. And now a lot of your activities, your interviews, the way you're interacting with college admissions counselors can have a way bigger impact than it ever did in the past. What can you expect from us as a school supporting you in this process? Most of the process we're here to support. So like I said, here we are doing this work to begin with and letting you know what you need to do in the next 4 months, individual one-on-one meetings. The 2 biggest pieces of the Common Application that you need to do, which are your activities and your personal essays, we'll work with you on in September, support you in any fee waivers that you might need. 1 family meeting now, and then probably an application focused meeting in the fall, and then a financial aid, scholarship, and or like decision meeting in the spring is when you can anticipate like the 3 meetings to happen. Again, as a small school working with guides that not only know you based on small class sizes, but maybe teaching you multiple years, advisors, especially at the UA level that may have had you for 3 years, and being able to speak to you more holistically than just a student in my 40-person class is a huge value. We also have a strong relationship and reputation with a lot of these schools. Um, Again, a lot of these reports that we're able to send are helpful to schools, but a lot of times there's conversations happening with our counselors and advisors and admissions officials as well. We're running scholarship aid and financial aid workshops kind of September throughout March. We try to pass forward as much information as we can. Sometimes it's just like all the updated scholarships that come out and we just kick them forward into the class of 2025 email chain. We put them on Schoology, we put them in announcements, we kind of put them up on a bulletin board. So any and all valuable information, we try to like draw it to you in kind of mass communication formats, emails, newsletters, up on Schoology, but then also one-on-one and on bulletin boards. Again, I would talk to all of the folks that have gone before you, especially this year's seniors, friends that you have, family members that you have, get their best tips, tricks, advice about schools and this whole process. All right, a couple links here, and again, this will be shared and captured, so you can come back to this at any time. This speaks to some of the flyout programs. But I am happy to work with Nick to field as many questions as I can that have come through the chat over the last 50 minutes.
Do you want me to read them out, Matt, or do you want to go through the I guess I'll read them so that everyone can see them too, but I'll go ahead and read them if you just want to answer them, Matt.
Sure. Feels more dynamic if you're jumping in there to read them.
All right, Matt. What is a 100% need-based school?
So these are the schools that will work with you to try and capture as much of your financial need as possible, right? And so, again, recognizing that we have students coming from all across the spectrum in terms of the money that they may have resourced and available for colleges. So you're disclosing what your need is, and those schools, again, often through the FAFSA or the CSS profile, are trying to what do I want to say, do a fair and equitable gauge of what your family can support you with, and then trying to cover the rest of that cost.
Thank you, Matt. There was a question about the PSAT/NMSQT, so in other words, the pre-SAT and the National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test that students could take in the fall of their junior year. Can you speak to that and how juniors may get hooked up with that?
Yep, sure. That has shifted a lot with us as all of these standardized testing procedures have changed. I ran the PSAT here for probably 8 years, and it was often the Wednesday before MEA break, and had everybody take it, and we paid for it as a school and said this is a test that everybody should do as a practice for the ACT. As all the ACT, SAT expectations have changed, and school student stress, anxiety, and mental health has been more strained than ever before, we kind of stopped doing all of the standardized testing when we weren't finding that it was translating to college application success. So not heavily promoting the PSAT, and yet, yeah, in my time, we probably had 5 national merit scholars. So I would endorse folks that may test well, or this might be a strategic thing to do either as practice or because they think they could be a national merit scholar. Lots of our local schools are open testing sites and will, let you register for the test, pay the fee. I think off the top of my head, it's maybe a $20-25 registration fee. And so we probably have 2 to 3 students still taking the PSAT in the fall. Certainly would excuse absences based on those dates, but we don't have plans to run it for the whole junior class.
Thank you, Matt. There was a question about what is QuestBridge?
Yeah, QuestBridge is the scholarship. We often have 2 QuestBridge scholars every year. I probably will leave it at that. We often have our college counselor nominate candidates for that application in September. And so again, I don't want to get it wrong and reference what the criteria is for applying to the QuestBridge Scholarship Program, but we often have 2 QuestBridge scholars.
Yep. And I did drop a link into the QuestBridge website as well into the chat.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's see. If students are considering deferring a year after graduation, so in other words, deferring entering into college, should they still apply to colleges in their senior year?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, I think deferment and gap year had been more popular before COVID. It's certainly something that students are considering. I will say the value of having access to a college counselor and having, again, whether you want to call it access or you're just in the milieu of 70 other students who are all going through the same thing and then living through the same deadlines, means that you can be building a personal essay, asking for letters of recommendation, getting all of these counseling, filling out applications. All of it can get done a lot easier when you're a high school student, in school every day, working with your teachers, have the active relationship, can access your college counselor. And then most schools are pretty great around deferments. If you get in and May 1st comes around and you say, actually, I want to keep my acceptance here, but I want to defer to year. Most of the time, not only the acceptance, but the financial aid can get locked in. And then, depending on what you're deferring to, often a gap year and travel, volunteer service plans, you've got all of that work done. It essentially frees you up for 12 months to go do something else. And so, 2 reasons to really do all of this work your senior year and give yourself a break to do something else and have the access to all the people that you need to support you. I will also say, as Nick's looking for the next question, that I did do this work a decade ago. I know a lot of this information, but I'm also rusty and out of date, and this is far from my full-time job. And so acknowledge that there's information that's not fully up to date or that I'm missing here. So this is a really fun process for a lot of people, including me, but just that caveat and fair warning.
There's another question that popped up. I know you addressed this at the beginning of the meeting, but perhaps for folks that came later, Matt,
yep.
Information about our college counselor for next year.
Sure. Current college counselor is on leave. I don't have any information for an update. Right now, we're working with me and a handful of other folks to do these meetings. Great River's got, however I want to put it, full commitment to have somebody doing this job full time as soon as possible next year for next year's seniors class, for sure.
All right. It is 7:56, so we are approaching 8 o'clock. We've got time for another question if it pops up. But if not, I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. Again, this meeting has been recorded and will be sent off via email to everybody, as well as the slideshow and a few other links that we've shared out throughout the time. And you can always reach out to myself, Nick Beermann, nbeermann@greatriverschool.org, or Matt McElrath, mcelrath@greatriverschool.org, if you've got any questions as well. Since we do have just a moment, Matt, another question popped up. The timing of the GRS process. If junior year is a great time to visit colleges, when do we want to start that? It seems like sometimes we start a little bit later.
In terms of visiting colleges?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The message, the question is also in the chat.
Okay. I think I saw it coming through.
Yeah.
I think I saw the question, so maybe I'll just speak to that instead. One is just the reality of our counselor being on leave is part of the reason for a delay. And this meeting was originally scheduled, I think, in middle of March, and we've delayed it here 6 weeks now just to make sure that we're able to capture it. And so, right, in terms of access to visiting colleges during spring break, we're not giving this message until now. But it's also historically part of how the ebb and flow, the calendar of this college counseling position goes, is that it is probably 90% senior focused from day one all the way up until the end of February when first semester reports are done, and there's a bit of a lull. That's usually the time that we start talking about PSEO, talking about the IB diploma program to sophomore families, and then also having this conversation with junior families. So this is our normal timeline for having these conversations with families, but probably delayed by maybe a month this year.
Cool. Carrie, thank you for your comments. They are things as we look to improve our situation and improve what we do here at school every year. I appreciate your feedback. If you got any questions, again, reach out to us now. It is approaching 8 o'clock. There was one more question about process, Matt. Do you want to reach out individually, or do you want to be able to answer in person?
Sure. Go ahead and ask a question.
Okay. How does GRS help students figure out what they are interested in?
In terms of like majors and things that they're interested in studies?
Yeah. So like when you're meeting with juniors, for instance, what kind of conversations happen?
Sure. I think that is a conversation that we have tended to say, like, knowing that so much of the interest changes over time, that we're having a bit of a conversation based on their experiences as students in classes, in their IB classes, in the program, and especially if they're being drawn to something in particular, like I mentioned, STEM and nursing, engineering, that we're saying, like, take that into consideration. Otherwise, I think we are looking at like a broader, more holistic fit versus like a specific major or program of studies. I think that is the trend in like this college process, more so than certainly when I was a student and I was kind of almost picking my major as a high school senior and knowing that it was going to change. So I think that's the answer, that it is not the priority in this college application process as much as it might have been in the past.
And also I would add that, like, with our CAS internship experiences and the CAS program in general, that gives our students a chance to explore a lot of different things too. And so we're trying to expose them to things outside of the classroom and sort of some unique opportunities that hopefully get them thinking about things they might be interested in, pursuing a career in the future. Andrea asked the question, are there tests we can offer for career assessment? There's quite a few floating around out there. I don't know if GRS has a history of ever doing any of those career inventories.
I don't think that Teresa has ever, suggested students away from them. But again, a lot of this presentation and other presentations are based on her notes. And so it isn't focused on like a specific career or major as much as a holistic fit with schools. So short answer, no, I don't have a recommendation for kind of a career inventory.
All right, cool. All right, thanks again, y'all. Again, reach out if you've got questions. Otherwise, have a wonderful night. Enjoy the little bit of blue sky we have left, and take care.